Hello and welcome to the Sexually Satisfied Woman. I am your host, Eva Blake. And in this series, I'm talking to a variety of experts who are uniquely qualified to discuss some of the most common challenges that women face in our sexuality. And over the course of this series, my hope is that we are going to offer real practices and proven strategies to boost your confidence, ditch the shame, and create truly remarkable relationships and really juicy intimacy so that you can have the sexual satisfaction that you deserve. And it's a good, juicy pleasure of mine to be here with Betty Martin today. She has had her hands on people professionally for more than 40 years, 30 years as a chiropractor and 15 years as a certified surrogate partner and somatic sex educator. She says some of it is legal and some of it is questionable. So that's fun. We're going to talk about that today. And these days, her passion is training other hands on practitioners in consent skills and how to teach their clients empowered choice so they can stop doing what they think they're supposed to and start doing what it is they want to. Her class for practitioners is called Like a Pro, and it has taken her all over the world. She is also a long-time Cuddle Party facilitator and is part of the team that trains, certifies, and supports new facilitators. Her new book is called The Art of Receiving and Giving, The Wheel of Consent. So welcome, Betty Martin.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here.
I'm really excited about your book, The Wheel of Consent. I'm excited about this piece of work. My experience has been that it has been a real paradigm shift for myself, for my clients that I've worked with. So I want to spend some time talking about this piece.
Great.
I would love if you could give us kind of the 30,000 foot view, right? What is this piece of framework and how does it help us understand our sexual and emotional interactions?
Ooh, that's a great question. The 30,000 foot view. I like that. The Wheel of Consent is a model that's based on the fact that when I'm touching you, I can touch you the way you want, or I can touch you the way I want. And that both of those are important and needed. And it's important to be able to tell the difference. So it separates the who is doing question, which you can tell by looking in the window, see someone stroking down someone's back. You could tell who was doing, but you couldn't tell who it was for, because that depends on your agreement.
Beautiful.
And that it turns out that who it's for is a really important factor that most people don't think about until you learn about it, and then you realize that you've kind of been confused for a while. That's what it is.
A long while, maybe.
Yeah, for most of us.
Right. So who is this for is part of one of the three questions that you ask, right? Who is this for? What do you want? And what can I give with a full heart? And I find these to be so revolutionary, but I'd love for you to unpack for us, what is the significance of us actually knowing that, of us being able to answer that for ourselves?
Of which question? Who it's for? Of what it is we want?
Any or all of them.
Okay. Well, the way I started exploring this was when I started working with clients in somatic sex coaching. I would often ask people how they wanted to be touched. And once in a while they knew, but most of the time they didn't know, or they confused it with thinking I was asking, how can I touch you that you don't mind terribly much? Which is a very different question.
Right.
So I would say, how would you like to be touched for a few minutes? And they would say things like, well, I don't know. No one has ever asked me that. Or you're the expert. What do you think I should want? Or I don't know. Gosh, sometimes I like XYZ. Or, well, you could such and such, I guess. Which it's true I could, but that was not the question. And so just being asked how people wanted to be touched just opened so many doors of awareness for them and also for me of like, why is this so hard? And why do people get confused when we're asking what when someone's asking us what we want, why is that confusing? Like, it's a really simple question, but it's a hard question because often, of course, we don't know what we want. Um, and uh, and it's a vulnerable question. Of course it is, because as soon as you notice what you want and ask for it, you're now vulnerable because someone could laugh at you or ridicule you or shame you or say no or any number of things. So it's inherently vulnerable to ask
Mhm.
for what you want. Of course it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Right. Uh, I didn't think about these questions. How would I like to be touched? I think that I was in that camp until I started doing sexuality specific work, until I
Mhm.
was in classes
Mhm.
directly trying to learn, right? And
Yeah.
then I was, called into the field and I was like, okay, now I'm going to, do this work with other people. But I was also in that camp of
Yeah.
like, what can I tolerate for a little while
Yeah.
until we can go from, like, where we are now to, like, where I think would be fun to go,
Yeah.
right? I was
Yeah.
definitely,
Exactly.
in that position, and it is so confronting
Yeah.
to, to answer that, not just to be vulnerable, but it really, like, shines a flashlight in the eyes. We're like,
Yeah.
Well, what if I don't know? And
Yeah.
is this gonna be okay?" And, uh,
Yeah.
I'm curious for you, in this work and in creating this framework that we're all so very blessed with, right? Um, how do we find the answers?
To what it is we want.
Yeah.
It's really simple. You just stop what you're doing and you wait. Which, the idea that, well, I don't know what I want, we speak of it as if that's a problem, but it's not a problem. It's only a problem if you're in a hurry to get going. If you're not in a hurry to get going, you realize that that question is a luxury. It's like, wow, somebody wants to know what I want, and I have all the time in the world to ponder and notice what that is. That's an astounding luxury,
Mhm.
really, but it doesn't feel like one because of the vulnerability. And it's not a problem not to know. There's always times we don't know. Of course there are. So that's not a problem unless you're in a hurry to get going or you think you're supposed to be in a hurry to get going. Then it's
Yeah.
a problem. And usually, a few seconds, 30 seconds, maybe a minute, it'll bubble up when you just sit and wait for it and um, and notice. Part of that, of course, is being able to tune into your body and notice. So there are a couple of ways to do that. One is you just sit and wait, and the bubbling up will come from your body up into your brain, and you'll notice, oh, I would like my arm scratched, or oh, I would like my ear massaged, or whatever it is. Another way is to just kind of take a little scan around yourself. Okay, who wants to be touched? Is it shoulders? Is it arms? Maybe it's my back. Oh, my foot. My foot's talking to me. You know. But yeah, and as you practice it in this very simple setting of being asked how you want to be touched, the pathways from your body up to your brain get clearer. And so that ability to notice what you want gets easier and easier and starts to expand out into your life.
Mhm.
And it
Thank
may
you
be
so
that what
much.
you
Yeah.
want is time to think about what you want. Yeah.
I love the reframe, right? Especially the piece about not knowing what we want is not a problem.
Yeah.
Because I think there's so much pressure
Yeah.
that we're supposed to know and act, right? And we're supposed to be in active motion all the
Yes.
time.
Yes. By golly,
And
get going.
yeah,
Yeah.
right, right. We should have already been there, right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
So I love this, I love this piece of advice that it is okay for us to slow down. It's okay for us to stop. It's okay for us to allow that to be a luxury. And that even
Yeah.
when you said that, I just felt this great sense of relief. Like, oh, yeah, I don't
Yeah.
actually have to hurry anywhere, right?
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
fire in the building.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a great expression. Yeah.
Um, I also really love the question that you ask, what can I give with a full heart? Right. And it really, when I have worked with the wheel in all of its quadrants, and for all the folks who are watching, you will have a chance to figure out or to learn all the details. But um, as I was really thinking about that, what do I really want and who's it for and what can I give with a full heart? I would notice for myself that there would be moments where I'm doing something and I'm not happy about it and I feel like I have to, and this kind of sense of duty or obligation. And so this
Mhm.
question really allowed me to, again, step back and slow down, and like
Mhm.
there's no fire, I don't have to do anything, right? And
Right. Right.
it feels very liberatory to ask this question. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, with the folks that you've worked with in the times that you have taught this, what are other people experiencing when they come into contact with this?
Pretty much what you described. A lot of people, when you ask them what they want, people don't know or feel vulnerable or all the things that we just talked about. And when someone asks you for what they want, like maybe I want to run my hands through your hair, or maybe I want to explore your hand or something, or maybe I want you to rub my back, whatever it is. When people are asked to do something or asked to be allowed to do something, very often it's exactly what you described. One person said, well, it never occurred to me that it didn't have to happen.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm supposed to be okay with it. And what's wrong with me that I'm not okay with it? And I should be okay with it. And I should stretch myself. I should push myself. Like, if I'm not okay with it, I should do it anyway because maybe I'll like it. Terrible advice. Terrible advice. Um, so yeah, that's very common, and I think it comes from our childhoods mostly, that we got punished for saying no. I mean, do you know anyone whose parents said, "Gee, Susie, you know, you do a great job of saying no. I'm so proud of you." Probably not so much, you know. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it comes from a similar place, that also that feeling that we were just talking about of, well, I'm supposed to be okay with anything.
Yeah.
Um, we're I talk about this in my classes, that all of us are touched in ways that we don't want and that we don't like, and that we're powerless to prevent before we can talk. So it's very deep in our psyche, it's very deep in our nervous system. We know how to go along with stuff that we don't like.
Mhm.
And because it happens so early, we have learned that this is the nature of touch. The nature of touch is that stuff happens to us and we have to deal with it. And so learning that we do have a choice about it, sometimes we have the chance to learn that, and sometimes we really don't have the chance to learn it very much.
Mhm.
But learning that um, is profoundly liberating. That I have a choice about how I'm touched. Wait a minute, I do? You know, it's profoundly liberating. Yeah.
And there's something else here that you're touching on too, which is that um in my experience, and when I've worked with clients, there's like, these are the things that I like, I think, right? These are the things that I absolutely do not like. But there's like a really wide gulf,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
In all that space of, you know, I'll try it for you, or I'm not really sure, or it's happening, but I can't really feel anything,
Mhm.
or I haven't made my decision up about that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's so much space between the two poles of what I know.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd like to ask
Thank
you,
goodness for that space.
yeah, right. It's full of opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I want to ask you about about this idea of staying even. And, we mentioned it, you mentioned it earlier about, when someone asks you, how would you like to be touched? And it becomes a very vulnerable place, right? And this idea that if we stay even and if we do the same thing over and over again and we're always the giver, right? I find that a lot with my clients that they're usually somewhere I'm always trying to serve. I really want my partner to be happy. I'll do anything that they want, right?
Mhm.
And so when they see this wheel of consent, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know there were so many options," first of
Mhm.
all,
So what
right?
do you mean by staying even?
Well, in your framework, staying even, keeping us out of the pleasure zone, right? We stay in the same quadrant or we do the same thing over and
Okay.
over again, as I
Yeah.
understand it. And, so I was thinking about this idea of if we do the same thing, even if we're really good at that thing, it takes a lot of risk to try something new,
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, and yet, I want to unpack like what is the value of us taking a risk in trying to not only touch but be touched in different ways, or asking for something different, or just even being in the process of naming the way that we want to interact in a new
Mhm,
and different way,
mhm.
right? What is the value of taking that risk?
That's a great question. I wanna clarify the use of the term risk
Great.
because it's total risk to say, "Would you move your hand, an inch to the left?" or something. It's like, it's a total risk because you could get shamed or whatever. But, um, so I would tend to say, well, uh, you know, start with small risks and, your confidence will grow. However, a lot of people will interpret that to mean try things that you're not comfortable with, which is another way of saying try things that you don't really want, which I don't buy because we already have plenty of practice at doing stuff we don't want. Nobody needs more practice at that. And when you kind of ignore your own boundaries and say, well, I'm going to make myself do this thing because it's good for me, then your nervous system goes into resistance and your pleasure system just can't engage really. So, what I think is a much more interesting approach is to notice what it is that actually sounds great and go there. And then your pleasure systems kick in and then you start just sort of automatically you become interested in, oh, maybe I want to try that, or oh, maybe I want to try that. And also it means expanding the options of what you might ask for. So in in sexual play, you might think, well, I'm supposed to ask for a hand here, or I'm supposed to ask for a pounding there, or I'm supposed to ask for something, involving an orifice or something. Um, but what if you expanded what it was possible to ask for? Maybe it's, I don't know what I want. I want 5 minutes to ponder that. I'll get back to you in a few minutes. Or maybe it's, I want you to go bring me a drink of water. Or maybe it's, I want you to cuddle me while I think about that. Or I want to take a nap. Or I want to take a rest. Or Um, you know what? If you really want to turn me on, let's get up and do the damn dishes and then I'll relax, you know? So if you expand what it's possible to ask for, there is something that sounds wonderful. Even if it's, you know what? I just want to take a nap. Will you just come back in 20 minutes? You know, there's something that sounds wonderful. And it's our job to notice, pay enough attention to ourselves to notice what that is and to trust it. Like that's real information. And when we follow what it is that we want instead of what we think we're supposed to want, everything, everything
Mm.
changes.
Yeah.
So when I say take a risk, I'm not saying do something that you don't want to do because you think you should do it. I'm not saying that. It's really kind of more risky or more scary to listen to what you actually want. That's what the real that's where the real work is.
Yeah.
And that's where that's where it really gets kind of scary. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to ask to have my feet rubbed. Like, you know, yeah.
Right. To really show up and be truthful, be honest,
Uh-huh,
be really
uh-huh,
clear. Right.
yeah, yeah.
So we've been talking about this framework called the wheel of consent. But I'd love for you to share with us, how do you define consent?
Oh, consent is a great word. It's actually it's a terrible word because if you look it up in the dictionary, which I did a year or two back, I thought, well, I'm teaching this stuff. I should look up and see what it means. It means being willing to do what someone else wants or willing to let them do what they want to you. It's essentially saying yes to what somebody else wants. There's nothing in there about asking for what you want. It's being willing to do what somebody else wants. Well, that's an important skill, but it's only half the picture. And so this is why a lot of people think consent means permission. But permission means I'm letting you do what you want. I'm giving you permission to do what you want.
Mhm.
Well, that's also a useful skill, but it's only half the picture. What if I'm asking you, would you please scratch my back? Where does permission fit in there? It doesn't fit, it just doesn't apply. So consent is way more than permission. And technically, it means being willing to do what someone else wants. But when I use it, I've expanded it to really mean more of an agreement. If you say get consent or give consent, you're talking about um, that permission to do something. And I think of consent as being something that you arrive at together
Mhm.
that often involves a little bit of a conversation, sometimes a big conversation. Um, but I think of it more as agreement. And really, the wheel of consent should be called the wheel of agreement, but it's too long. So, so we use consent. But um, um, that's the problem with consent. It's about what somebody else wants.
Mhm. I appreciate, again, that reframe as well, that it is about a conversation. There is
Mhm,
something that we're creating together. And so often these ideas of giving and receiving, I'm going to touch you or you're going to touch me, is very unidirectional, right?
mhm. Yeah,
It's something is going to happen to you or something is going to happen to me, which is very different than we're coming together to create the dinner together,
yeah,
right? And then we're going
yeah,
to have something that we're going to both enjoy.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
So you have something called the 3-minute game as a way to play with these ideas of touch and experience and leaning into what something feels like.
Mhm,
I'm curious why it's important to use a game like this to create great sex with someone or just great relationship and communication. What
mhm.
makes a game like this so valuable?
Well, a game like this creates a container for, and a container is just a set of expectations or agreements. So if we're making out and rolling around and getting handy with each other, we have some idea, if we've been together before, how it's going to go or who's going to do what and what it means and who's supposed to feel what, and we have this kind of idea where we're going. With a game like the 3-minute game, that is off the table. I mean, that assumptions are no longer apply. So we have a different set of agreements. And in the 3-minute game, our agreement is we're going to ask these questions and we're going to take turns. Um, and and it's for a limited time. So and we're doing it to experiment, to learn something, to just see what we find. It's a very different expectation than your normal route to sexual play. And for the Wheel of Consent and the 3 minute game, I do recommend that people set aside a time and create a container in which you're setting a timer, you're agreeing to take turns, and when you're in your turn, you're not switching it up. I mean, you're not, you can change what you do, but you're not changing. You're either receiving or giving. You're not changing that part. Um, so it it lets you dive into an experience and experiment in ways that would never happen otherwise because it's just too intimidating. So just to be clear, the 3 minute game is a game that you play. The Wheel of Consent is a model of basically what happens when you do that. So you can use them interchangeably or not as you like.
Great, thank you. I have played the wheel of the 3 minute game before, and I have to say that sometimes being in those moments where I have to say what I want, right? Whether it's the way that I want to touch you, right, or the way that I am asking you to touch me, that sometimes there is this moment of like, oh my God, did I make the right choice?
Yeah, yeah. Change your mind. But it's your
Right. And
turn.
right, and that's exactly the thing that it helps us practice, right?
Mhm,
Is not only being present in the moment, but being willing to change my own mind,
mhm.
to feel differently inspired,
Yes,
right? And I think
yes,
that that is
absolutely.
something that's so valuable that we don't get a lot of encouragement about,
Yeah,
that it's okay
yes.
to change the shape of our interaction as
Yeah,
we need it to.
yes. Who knew? Yeah.
So I want to ask you about your work as a surrogate partner, and if you could unpack for us the difference between a surrogate partner and a somatic sex educator, and what makes this realm of work so valuable, especially in terms of the conversation that we've been having around how to be present with touch and how to determine what it is that you want.
Mhm, mhm. Great. Um, so to be clear, my work started out as sex coaching. After a couple years, I opened it, and that was clothed. It's pretty careful, kind of structured, is experiential, but it was clothed, or at least I was clothed, and sometimes the people were, depending on what we're doing. And after a while, I realized that I was interested in offering more specifically erotic experiences for people for whom it was useful. And so I started offering more erotic experiences, which means I was willing to get undressed. And so I call that sex work. And sex work is very broadly defined. So that's why I say some of it legal, some of it questionable, because that was not legal. Um, but a somatic sex educator, and again, this is a very broad range of ways people practice. We may be completely clothed in our office doing exercises, but the thing is that it's somatic, means it's body experience based. So I may be leading you through um, movement. I may be leading you through breath. We may be touching in some way that's not terribly sexy. It could, that there's that in. There's maybe I'm giving you an erotic massage and helping you learn how to sustain your arousal, or helping you learn how to be comfortable with the fact that you have desire. Maybe you're role playing. It's a very wide range. Um, a surrogate partner is a very specific practice, and that is that um, we work. There's three of us. There's you, the client, there's me, and there's your therapist, and the three of us are talking to each other. So that this came out of Masters and Johnson's in the 50s and 60s, where they were creating these exercises for couples to do. But if someone didn't have a partner, they needed someone to practice with. So then they'd call the surrogate. And a lot of people think that, well, surrogate means that's the person you're going to have sex with, and you might, but not usually. Most of what you need to learn about sex, you learn before you ever get your clothes off. So it's surrogates may, help you learn how to groom. They may help you. They may role play with you asking for a date. They may role play and go out on a date. There's lots of different things that a surrogate might do, but they are working with the therapist. Um, a a somatic sex educator or a sexological body worker or sacred intimate, um, they may consult with therapists from time to time, but the therapist is not guiding the session as you would with a surrogate partner. So I've done all those, um, and I haven't done very much as a surrogate partner because there were no therapists around uh, to engage in that type of dynamic. But I did on occasionally consult with people's therapists with their permission. But mostly I was working on my own.
So, in your work, in all these variety of capacities, and also, you are training people in this class like a pro, to help other people who do touch to be more aware of these questions that we've been asking, right? Which is like, is this for me? Is this for you? Are we in some version of
Mhm.
autopilot, right?
Yeah, right.
Um, and I'd love to get your perspective on the value of a client seeing any one of us who are in this realm of hands-on sexuality work.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what if somebody's watching this and they're like, that's not for me, or I don't understand who would do that, right?
Mhm.
What are some of the benefits?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. The benefit is, if I'm a therapist or a coach, we can talk all day long about what your experience is. But until you have a physical experience of what you're talking about, number one, I can't see it. And number two, there's things that you cannot find until you have a physical experience. And so, as a somatic sex educator, for example, we can be in experiences and I can see how you respond, which otherwise nobody would ever see. And I can say, what happened just there? I noticed that you stopped breathing. Did you notice that? And then we pause and we play there and see what happens and what we discover. Um, so, um, yeah, it's having the physical experience that you cannot replace a somatic experience. It's not for everybody. A lot of people are not comfortable with the idea. A lot of people are just not interested. You may be intimidated by the idea. And what I'd recommend is that you interview your potential educator or therapist, which you would do anyway, before you choose a therapist, um, to find out what they do and what they think about this, that, and the other, because it needs to be a good match for you. Someone who would be a great client for me may not be a fit for somebody else, and vice versa. There are people who I'm not a good fit for, and they need to see somebody down the road. Yeah.
I love that you brought up that piece of, you know, hey, did you notice that you stopped breathing there?
Mm-hmm.
Because, that's one of the responses that I think most of us humans have when
Yeah.
we're tapping into something that doesn't feel great, right?
Yeah.
It's not, we're,
Yeah.
that's not a moment when we're moving to, like you said, the thing that would feel really amazing, the
Yes.
really great
Yeah.
experience that we'd love to have. And
Yeah.
often it's so unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the things I find so valuable about, and just so humbling, about being in this position in this work, is to be with someone in that moment and to
Oh,
bring that
yeah. Yeah.
moment of what's unconscious into consciousness and see
Yeah.
how it then, changes the rest of the moment or the rest of the
Yeah.
life, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um
Absolutely.
and we don't have that kind of teaching or opportunity
Yeah.
sometimes when we're with our partners. So
Yeah.
I really just want to appreciate this work that you've created for us, and through the will of consent and the 3 minute game, because it gives us a moment of an opportunity to slow down enough
Mhm,
to be
mhm,
able to get those gems of wisdom that we might need to go, see a
mhm.
professional for, right?
Yeah,
To get that kind of
yeah,
observation,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Eddie,
yeah.
I want to thank you so much for this opportunity to talk with you. It's a great honor and a privilege of mine to have you here. So thank you so very much.
You are so welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And for all of our viewers, please come back tomorrow for another really rich conversation in the exploration of sexual satisfaction and all of the juicy goodies that it entails.